And so in a Christian context, then we understand this as God's compassionate spirit sustains all life. And so what we want to do is begin and remember and rest in and be renewed by this grounding and sacred presence. And so God's sacred presence is available to us unconditionally. And when we're disconnected from that and from our compassionate selves, then our spiritual invitation is to catch our breath, to become grounded, and to return to that sacred presence that we know is the core of our existence. And so it's the difference between reacting to life circumstances and responding with grounded, reflective self-awareness. And so that capacity to distinguish between our response to a life circumstance and the life circumstance itself is the beginning of the grounded process. And so this solid ground is what we call awareness. And so we all know what this was like because we've experienced moments in our lives when we feel calm, centered, we feel most alive, we feel like ourselves. And these moments are grounded moments in our life. But most of the time, our world is chaotic. So we have emotions from all sorts of, being in a board meeting and being called out, or having some sort of altercation at church. Maybe some of our youth group members trigger us. And so we need some time to ground. And so we like to think of groundedness in terms of the Incredible Hulk, because the Hulk is a pretty good embodiment of rage. I think we've all felt like this at some one time or another in our lives. And it's a really, really good example, because when Bruce Banner becomes enmeshed in the rage and anger that causes him to transform into the Hulk, he loses all sense of himself. He becomes this great giant green monster that just destroys everything. And so this is the embodiment of reactivity in the Hulk. And so when this happens to us, we need to wedge some space between whatever is consuming us and our sense of ourselves. And so sometimes this can just be breathing, simply focusing on our breath, taking a few moments to breathe, and this can bring us back to ourselves. Breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and it helps us calm down. But other times, if we are truly hulking out, we need to wedge some more space between there. We need to remove ourselves from the situation most times and engage in some sort of activity. So changing our location, engaging our body, connecting with a trusted person, performing a spiritual practice, something that brings us back to our sense of who we are and our sense of ourself. And so when we settle onto this ground, compassion for ourselves and others can be intentionally cultivated. And when we take the time to cultivate compassion for ourselves and understand the wisdom within whatever's causing us to hulk out, we become sort of Hulk Banner. So that's the picture here is the Hulk comes to, and Bruce Banner come to a place where he can exist as both, because the Hulk ultimately has some yearning for flourishing for Bruce Banner's life. And so this picture represents understanding that wisdom and acting from that wisdom. The phrase that we like to keep in mind when we're triggered is don't just do something, sit there, because we like to rush to action a lot. And when we do that, when we're in a reactive state, we do what the Hulk does, which is just leave a wake of destruction and chaos. So there's a history of this, especially for white people, when it comes to having a genuine concern for racism and wanting to address racism in some way, but not taking the time to understand how we're affected as white people by our racialization as white. And so there's a history of us acting out in ways that are actually reinforcing racism in our attempts to be anti-racist. And so that's why we say, don't just do something, sit there. We need to do some internal work first.